East Lothian's a mix of built-up areas, towns, villages, expansions of the countryside and urban areas. All routes from East Lothian lead into Edinburgh, but internally there's a problem with public transport.
It's worse if you're disabled. Think of why you use transport.
To go shopping, to get to a medical appointment, to see friends and family, to go on holiday, to be like everyone else and see the world.
How are things going to improve transport for disabled people? Are we there yet? There are many obstacles to be overcome. Here's Ken Reid of the East Lothian Access Panel.
The East Lothian Access Panel deals with issues that might affect people with mobility disabilities, so they may use wheelchairs. It's also about how people with walking difficulties would be able to cope. We deal with people who have got sensory disabilities, so I'm blind. We also would consider the needs of those with hearing impairments. We would also look at some of the aspects that affect folk with learning disabilities, and really looking across the whole raft of disability issues to see where the services need to be improved.
Walking, the cheapest mode of transport, Shax's pony.
But we're not all able to, and sometimes it's harder than it should be.
One of the biggest challenges that disabled people have is just moving around the streets. A lot of us don't drive because of our disabilities, so we're up and down the pavements a lot, and we do find that can be really hazardous and quite treacherous, to the point where some people simply opt not to make the journey. They will stay in their own homes rather than head out. Some of the challenges that we face are the lack of drop curbs in appropriate places for people who are wheelchair users or are struggling with the steps of a curb. Those of us who can't see find that the curbs have been dropped but no tactile paving has been put in place, so we just walk straight out into the road and into the traffic. Not such a good idea. We have trouble with street furniture, permanent street furniture like bollards, lampposts, iron railings. All sorts of things can be obstructive, can cause barriers that are maybe too narrow for a wheelchair to pass through. And they're designed with other intent, but the consequence of them is that they limit the mobility of people with disabilities. We find advertising boards outside shops. Then at least once a week in most of our towns and villages, we have wheelie bins scattered all over the pavement. And I actually find most of the time the homeowners are relatively responsible. They still have to put them out and they do take up space, but it tends to be once they're emptied that the hazard really begins, because they're not put back in quite such a neat array, and sometimes the whole pavement can be blocked. This doesn't just affect people with disabilities, but it will also be a hazard to a parent pushing a pushchair, or somebody maybe with a family group who are trying to manoeuvre them all down the same pavement. So lots of people can be affected by this. And then the final aspect of it is responsible parking. The number of times I've come across cars parked on pavements, and the answer from the drivers is normally, well, the road's too busy to park on the road. The consequence is that the person who wanted to use the pavement has to walk in that busy road in order to get by. If it's too busy for a car to park, it's certainly too busy for a person to walk. But that seems to be the expectation, is that we will have to walk down the road. There's an act going through the Scottish Parliament at the moment, the Responsible Parking Bill, and that will try and address some of the parking issues. But I'd like to see many of these things improved before the Act comes into force. We can just do something about it now. We can just take an action. We can start people behaving more responsibly and start to clear up the pavements and make journeys for people with disabilities just that little bit simpler and easier to complete.
If you're lucky enough to have a car, you're likely to have one of these. But there's no guarantee you'll get one of these. And where's his blue badge?
One of the other areas that the panel is concerned about is access to public transport. There are a number of issues for people with disabilities.
So, we're at the bus stop.
And some of us have to rely on wheelchairs to get about. Here's Ginny Old.
I'm Ginny Old and I've been in a wheelchair all my life. I could try to take a bus, but getting on and off is a problem. Not all the buses can kneel down and they don't all have a ramp. When I get on the bus, there's only room for one wheelchair. Maybe there's another wheelchair user there already. So then I have to wait on another bus. I'm still waiting.
The buses can be difficult. The bus timetable is fairly sparse much of the time. It's the last bus back from Haddington for me is just after 5 o'clock at night, so I can't go to anything in Haddington for an evening. And there are many areas of the county that are only served sporadically by public transport. So if somebody's wanting to go out, then it takes a lot more planning. And there can be issues of access to the buses as well. Some buses will take wheelchairs, some buses won't. And without that kind of consistency that says I know when I turn up with a wheelchair that I can get on the bus, then it's going to be difficult to make that journey by public transport. Imagine if you've got taking your bus to your destination and it all worked fine. You're then waiting for the last bus home at night and it turns up and it's a different style of bus and you can't get your wheelchair onto the bus. Are you going to have to go and find a local hotel in order to stay overnight? Or are you going to have to phone a taxi company to come and pick you up? A huge expense. These are issues that disabled people, particularly wheelchair users, face regularly when they're making journeys.
Bus operators are trying. First Scotland has a safe journey card. It gives older people a way of discreetly asking the driver for help. For instance, asking for more time to reach their seat before the driver pulls away, or for the driver to speak up because they're hard of hearing. The Better Journey card has been developed with disability groups. The card contains 10 messages ranging from "please help me find a seat" and "please count my change with me" to "please face me and speak clearly, I lip read" and "please be patient, I have a hidden disability."
Similar to these is the Thistle Assistance card used by Lothian buses. It's issued by Sestran, the South East Scotland Transport Partnership, one of 7 such partnerships of local authorities throughout Scotland. And there's the Confederation of Passenger Transport Code for mobility scooters on low-door buses. There's a permit to show the driver when you get on.
Tickets, passes and cards seem like a lot of paperwork. Here's Ken Reid again.
I have 3 cards, all issued by East Lothian Council or by different departments of East Lothian Council for different purposes. I have a blue badge for parking. I have a national entitlement travel pass to give me access to the buses and trains. And I like to access the leisure facilities that are run by an arm's length trust from East Lothian Council. And I need a pass to allow me to gain the concession entry for that. It would be wonderful if I could just have one application to prove that I have got that entitlement and that need. There may be multiple cards, but there doesn't need to be multiple applications. It just lots of forms to fill in, lots of processes to go through. I'd like to see that all tidied up and made an awful lot neater and more convenient for the people who are actually going to have to use those cards. A lot of the transport infrastructure is very unforgiving. Our rail network obviously has been here for over 100 years. Many of the buildings reflect that, and the stations that we have were designed at a time when disability wasn't really very high on anybody's agenda. So a number of the stations in East Lothian can only be accessed from one side.
For example, here we are at Drem Railway Station. If you go to North Berwick, you're on the car park side of the platform. If you're going to Edinburgh, you have to cross the bridge. If you're in a wheelchair, you might have to park here. But if you're parked here and you're coming from Edinburgh, how are you going to get back from the other side? You'll have to go round by the bridge. Then you have to cross the bridge, down the road, to the main road, down here, and into the station.
I have heard of people boarding the train from Edinburgh to North Berwick because they can't get onto the platform that heads to Edinburgh. So they have to go all the way down to North Berwick, wait till the train turns around and comes back out again, gets them into Edinburgh. So the journey takes a lot longer. Other people have to plan their journeys with a lot more attention to detail than most people take as being the normal. They may have to book ramps to get on and off the trains. They may have to book assistants to help them to get onto the train. And so the spontaneity of just saying, it's a nice afternoon, let's go and do something, that's always a lot harder to do. But many of the things could be achieved if we looked at ways of doing it.
So what's the council doing about helping disabled people access transport?
Well, let's ask somebody who should know. Michael Veach, you are the East Lothian councillor responsible for transport.
That's right, yes.
What is East Lothian Council doing to help people with disabilities access transport?
Well, we work in a number of areas. Obviously, we have a significant role in taxis, for example, where we license taxis and we make sure that all the taxis, other than private hire, but all the other taxis that are licensed in East Lothian are wheelchair accessible. And also we also offer training for all taxi drivers too. The main area that we have influence over would probably be in bus services, because we pay for a lot of the bus services, particularly within East Lothian, not so much the ones between here and Edinburgh, but within the county itself. So I guess a lot of the issues that would affect people with disabilities would be exactly the same concerns that anyone else would have in terms of making sure that bus services and rail services connect with each other better, and that's something we're trying very hard to do. We're also just about to re-tender a lot of the routes within East Lothian and are trying to have a wide public consultation on that, and would certainly welcome the views of people with special needs who are accessing transport, as well as anybody else, any issues that should be improved there. We've also recently signed a new East Lothian bus charter with Railbus, who are the local campaign group, and that commits all 5 bus companies in East Lothian to ensure that their vehicles are accessible, and also that the bus driver gives the passenger any additional assistance that they need. The final thing I would say is that we also run a bus forum that we started about 2 years ago, and that brings together all the bus operators in East Lothian with representatives from bus users, council officers, councillors, other politicians, and that's a forum really designed to raise any issues that local people have with the bus services, primarily with the operators, and that will of course include accessibility issues too.
What can be done to improve things in the future?
Well, I think the key issue that we can do is engage with transport operators, maintain good relationships with them, which we try to do anyway. So when issues do arise of concern to disabled users, that we have the channels open to address those. So for example, we're here now obviously at Dunbar Railway Station. An issue that I've addressed recently was to do with wheelchair access at Haymarket Station in Edinburgh. Of course not in East Lothian, but a lot of East Lothian people will access Haymarket, and as I recall there was no wheelchairs at all at Haymarket, and that was an issue I was able to address with ScotRail, and as I understand it they've now procured 2 wheelchairs. So that's the kind of thing, we keep the channels open. Likewise with buses, we're very fortunate, our bus operators do a lot of good work. First operate the main routes into Edinburgh. They used to use coaches that did not have very good access for people with disabilities or older people, and they've now put on low floor vehicles, and I know an awful lot of lobbying went on there. We're very fortunate that Lothian Buses, the main bus company in East Lothian, certainly the biggest, make sure there's wheelchair access on every bus. But we do maintain good relationships with all the bus companies. So I would encourage anyone who's got any concerns at all with accessing transport in the county to get in touch, either with myself personally or the local councillor. And we can, if it's something the council's responsible for, we can try our best to deal with it directly. If it isn't, then we can certainly lobby or speak to the organisation involved and see if we can get something done.
Michael Veitch mentioned Railbus. Here we are at their AGM, and here we have Councillor Dave Berry. What do you think you can do about problems that disabled people find?
The disabled people have had a fair bit done for them, but obviously they have a lot that they need to have done. Access ramps, castle curbs, that sort of thing. And one of the problems is, not that it's their fault, is that that absorbs a lot of the official time and effort and capital as well in providing things that are reasonable to be asked to be provided. Half the problem is, though, that the basic services, I think, aren't yet properly coordinated, and that it would benefit not just disabled people but the public in general if we had a much better overview on how rail and bus, and particularly the local bus services, because in a place like East Lothian it's relatively thinly populated, so we don't have the density of bus routes, and what routes we have to use well. It's much more important to make sure that disabled people get a regular service they can use regularly when they understand it, and frankly I don't think we're good enough at that yet. We need to get better.
I'm Gavin Booth, I'm Director of Bus Users Scotland, and as such we deal very much with passengers at the bus stop, and we hear what they have to say, we receive their complaints, we handle the complaints on behalf of Scottish Government. And while the situation is getting very much easier for access to buses, it's still not perfect. We hear complaints from passengers who have had problems where there's only one wheelchair space in a bus and there are two wheelchairs. We have problems where passengers can't actually get on the bus because of parked cars. They can't see the bus because of parked cars and lorries in bus stops. There are a lot of issues that still have to be dealt with, but gradually the infrastructure is there that will allow people to have much greater access to buses. It's not just wheelchairs, it's people with hidden disabilities, it's people with visual disabilities, with hearing disabilities, with just difficulty moving. And buses are getting very much better in terms of handling all passengers.
Hello, I'm Harry Barker. I'm a member of Railbus, and I'm also on the steering committee of the East Lothian Community Rail Partnership, which has been approved by the Minister of Transport in Scotland. One of the aims of the Community Rail Partnership is to ensure that there is proper coordination of buses and trains at stations, that information is improved, that disabled access facilities are improved, and we have full disabled representation on the Community Rail Partnership. And we're also trying to make sure that these train services are properly advertised and the bus services are properly advertised. Information at train stations is significantly improved from what it is at the moment, and also to basically improve connectivity all over the place. And there are so many issues that we've looked at. We've gone through every bus timetable for every bus that passes a railway station. We are making suggestions as to how these timetables can be altered to actually include railway stations as timing points. We're looking at every station, doing an audit of every station with regard to disability access. All in, we are doing an audit of every station, and that is going to be coordinated and presented to the new ScotRail franchise holder.
Well, we're not there yet, but we are on our way. There's still a lot of work to be done, ideas to be made real, and lots of joined up thinking to do. And what of the future, Andrew?
Well, I'm still waiting for my hover car and jetpack.